a little bit also. So I have a copy of the rubrics from the syllabus. So let's take a moment and go over these and look at them a little bit. So you have 4 different rubrics at the end of the syllabus. There's one for the discussion boards, the discussion questions, you're welcome. And you're welcome. And there's one for, so first of all, will you please write your name on this, and then on the day when you give your presentation, will you please give it to me so that I can grade your presentation? So we'll talk about rubrics in general because we have all of the rubrics here, and then we'll talk about the rubric for the presentation, okay? So what's the reason for having a rubric? Why do we use these?
This one is standard that the presenter or us as students, when we make a presentation or take the PA or CLA, you have to look at that. And that's what you are going to look at to mark, to give us a score, to judge our work.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the standard, and so if you get full marks, everything will be here on the left column, right? So if you do perfectly, if we just look at the first one for the discussion board, for example, right? So here you have the points, the scale points and the actual points. So it's on a scale of 0 to 10, right? And so the first thing that we look at is if you answered the question, right? Sometimes students answer another question, or they don't answer the question that was asked. They say something, but it's not relevant to the question. That's the most important thing, right? Like, did you say something about that question? So if you said something very good, very thorough, you cited theory, then you should get full marks, right? If you kind of answered the question, then you get less. So this goes down, right, as you move to the right. So you can see on the left-hand side, student answers or responds to all questions completely. But then on the next one, student answers or responds to all questions, but lacks some demonstration of understanding. Right? And then you move down another one. Student answers or responds to at least one, but not all, and lacks, right? So it gets worse and worse as you go down. And then finally, student fails to answer or respond to discussion questions. So that would be a 0, right? A 0 or a 1. So the most important thing is if you answer the questions. The second thing is, did you respond to your peers? So it's supposed to be a discussion, right? So you're supposed to interact and ask questions and respond to what people say and respond to what the academic facilitator asks you, right? So this is supposed to be like our classroom discussion, right? So it's an opportunity to do this online where you can chat with each other about the ideas and the theories in the book. And so same kind of thing. If you do it full, complete, perfect, you get full marks. And moving down. And then finally, preparation. Student brings in outside examples. This is like extra credit, right? So if you bring in extra theory, if you found other things, this is really where you go above and beyond the expectations. You do some more research, some more reading, you're very thoughtful, you bring in your own ideas, okay? So the rubric is, it serves 2 purposes. One is to let the student know exactly what is expected of them, so that they know, what do I need to do in order to get perfect marks, right? What's required of me? What are the expectations of the professor or the university? The other reason for the rubric is to allow the teacher to grade the students more objectively. So I can look at your response, and rather than saying like, he's a good student, I'll give him a 10. She doesn't pay attention in class, she gets a 5, right? So it's not very fair, but we tend to do that if we don't have a rubric. We use a very subjective judgment of what the student is producing. So we take a lot of other things into consideration. We think, oh, they don't pay attention in class, they're always texting, they're always late, they're always interrupting. So all these other things we have in our mind, but we should really only be looking at the discussion board response. So this helps the teacher to keep on track too, so that our grading is more objective. So you have a rubric for the PAs. Let's see, the first one coming up is CLA. So we have professional assignment and CLA. So let's look at that one, because you have a PA that you submitted and that you're waiting for your grade, right? So the AF will use this to grade your paper. So once again, the most important thing is, did you stay on the topic? Did you answer the question? So the question was about the hierarchy of difficulty, right? Did you address that issue? Or did you talk about something else, right? So if you address that issue, right, that's the most important thing. So you did it successfully, coherently, accurately, and convincingly, right? Yeah, 50 points, top marks, right? But if you did it generally and mostly, okay, right? We move down the scale. Somewhat does not. Then the next thing is mechanics. So mechanics is how did you write, right? Do you use good paragraph structure? Do you use good grammar? Do you use good punctuation? Those are all mechanics. One thing with mechanics is the APA also, right? So I understand that you guys have a little bit of difficulty with APA. Is that right? Everybody has a little bit of trouble with APA. So let me tell you, the thing with APA, the reason for it is so that we have a standard. When people are writing scientific papers that they want to submit for publication, they all follow APA. So everything has the same format. You use the same font size, the same margins, the same types of headers, right? So everybody doesn't just invent and like, well, I'm going to use bold, I'm going to use italics, I'm going to use underline, right? So it looks like a mess. It's not aesthetically pleasing. So the reason is to have this standard so everything looks similar. In my opinion, the two most important things about APA are how to do citations and how to do the references. The other things are just standard procedures, very easy. The margins, the font, you just set it and no problem, right? It'll just stay standard. Citations take a little bit of work. You need to learn how to do that. So how you make a citation is when you take some material and you put it in quotes, right? So you take some information from your textbook and you want to use that as evidence to support your point in your paper. So you're going to take a direct quote. You need to be very careful because you want to have a good balance. You don't want to use too many quotes. Are you getting cold again? No? Right. Let me know if you're too cold, okay? I won't turn it down. You don't want to use too many quotes because that makes it sound like you're not confident. Like you have no idea. So you're just taking everybody else's ideas, right?
Their ideas are perfect.
Their ideas are really good, but you need to have ideas too.
How do you understand us so well?
As a teacher, I'm interested in what you're thinking. I already know what the theorists think. I care about your ideas. So I want to see what's going on in your mind. So tell me your ideas. So you use the theory to support your point, to substantiate your argument, but it's like salt and pepper. If you put in too much salt, you can't eat the food, right? It's terrible. I can read the book myself, right? But in your paper, I just want the salt and pepper of the citation. Like it? Yeah? Okay. So just a little bit of spice to make it interesting. Okay? There are different ways of doing the citations depending on where the information comes from. if it comes from an article with one author, or with two authors, or if it comes from a textbook, or if it comes from an online source. There are different standards for the way that we should do the citation. So this is just convention. It's like grammar, like I told you before. You can't say, oh, but why? Why do we use italics? Why do we use capital? Just because. Because I said so. Right? Every once in a while we can be authoritarian. Because according to APA, those are the rules. That's all. Don't stress, no big deal. Just follow the rules and you won't have any trouble. Okay? So there are many different ways of doing standards. There's APA, which we follow. There is another system called MLA, and there's another system called Chicago. And there are different standards. They do the same thing, but in different ways. So they use a different way of doing citations. Where in APA we use italics, they use underline. And it's just a different convention. So this is the convention that we follow, and most scientific research follows. Okay? So the best thing to do with APA is just go to the OWL Purdue website, and it has everything there. It's the best website for APA, and it has all of the information that you need. If you just do a Google search for OWL Purdue APA, it's got everything there. So if you're confused about how to do a citation, look it up. And it tells you one author, two author, from a book, from a journal. It tells you exactly how to do it. It gives you an example, and it just shows you. This is my favorite website. It's very, very clear. There's a website that APA puts out themselves. I don't like it as much. It's not as clear. This one is really good. So even I need to consult this and look, because I do use two different systems. So I use APA when I teach in America, and in Brazil they have a different system called ABNT. And same thing, like I said, like Chicago or MLA, where we use capital letters, they use sentence case, like just the first letter is capital. So it's hard to remember which is which. So you don't even need to memorize it. It's like a dictionary. Just look it up, all right? So it's very important to know how to do this. It's something that makes you different from everybody else. Just like having a master's will kind of set you apart from the crowd. Being able to do good APA makes your writing very elegant, very beautiful, very scientific, very academic, very well done. All right? Okay? So, no stress. Just go to OWL Purdue, look it up, no big deal. All right? So the other issue is how to do the references at the end, right? So the references should be in alphabetical order by the author's last name. In APA, we never put the author's first name, just the last name. They use the first initial of their first name, but not the whole name, okay? So when you refer to an author, you should always refer to their last name.
So like if Susan and Gas, would you say Gas?
Yes, exactly. Just gas. You don't need to say Susan, you don't need to say M. Okay. So you put gas and the year, right?
What is a year? It's cool.
Oh, do you have the page?
So that's 13.
Do you have the page? Yeah, 2013.
Usually it goes from the last name, the year, and then the name of the book, right?
So when you're doing a citation, and if you want, another day I can do like a more thorough presentation about APA. Would you like that? Do you want me to
If
do
you
that?
can manage the time. Yeah.
Okay, if I can manage the time, I'll try and fit it in.
Yes.
But yeah, in general, when you have a citation, so you have this, like, you know, whatever Susan Cass said. So you put the quotation, And then afterwards, you just say yes,
Parentheses.
2013. And then the period goes here. Okay? There's no period here. The period goes here. This is included in this sentence. Okay?
Is it okay if we can use our paper assignments and we show whether we are doing it the wrong way or the right way?
Sure.
With the APA.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think that most of us have mistakes in that.
Okay.
Everybody.
Yeah. Westcliff has a very nice tutorial on how to do APA. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I did.
Okay. So that should have all of the information in there according to what you need. One of the important issues, the reason that it's very important to cite the authors and put quotation marks, is because you want to give credit to the person who did the research and they published and did all of this hard work. We can't steal their ideas and pretend like they're ours, right? So we have to give them credit. What?
Consider plagiarism.
Yeah, that's plagiarism, right? So plagiarism is when we copy someone else's ideas, right? So in fact, it's much more sophisticated to show that you've done the reading and you've done the research and you know who said what. It looks very childish to take the ideas and pretend like they're yours when they're not, right? It's stealing, right?
But the problem with us sometimes is I don't know, I haven't read any other students' work or presentation. But when I write down my words on TA or CLA, and it is said that in the similarity percent that it is similar to some students, they write the name of the student or some students' words.
Some publications.
Yeah. So
So-
maybe that is because of the great mind meet. Their work, right?
That happens.
Yeah.
So Turnitin is a very interesting website.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting tool for teachers so they can check for plagiarism. But there are many different settings that you can put on Turnitin. And I must confess, I don't know exactly how it was set up here because we have a technical assistant at Westcliff who does that for us. When I teach at other universities, I set the settings myself. So I can put the parameters that I want to use for non-original content. So it should be set so that if the information is in quotes, it's not counted as non-original. So if you don't put quotes, then it will flag it. It will say, this information came from Gas. So it needs to have the quote mark. The other thing is you're all writing on the same topic. So of course there's going to be some similarity between students. That's why we say it's okay if you have like 20% similar content. We expect that because you're using the same words. You're using hierarchy of difficulty, right? You're using the same things. So there should be some overlap. That's why we don't say, oh, it needs to be 0%.
Sure.
Maybe 20, 25, it's okay. Right? Yeah.
Like when we cite correctly, it isn't counted as similarity.
Right. Yeah.
But depends on the technical guys. Also.
Yeah.
The way you set
yes.
the settings,
So
right?
the parameters that you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly.
But on GAP, it's different.
No, are you able to see your own originality report?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you? So on your originality report, it will like have colors,
That's
right?
right,
And it'll
that's
show, oh, this
Where-
came from this website, this came from this student's paper,
Exactly.
this came from this textbook, right? So if the information is in quotes, it shouldn't mark it in color. If it does, don't worry about it because the people who are grading your papers, the AFs, should not take that into consideration. If they see that it's in quotes, don't worry about it because it's been done correctly, okay? Only if it's not in quotes. And I'll double check, I've asked before, I wanted to confirm about the parameters that it was set up correctly, but I didn't receive a response. So I'll ask again because I wanted to make sure. There's another setting that you can put where you say disregard phrases of 5 words or less. Because for example, TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages, that's going to show as non-original because everybody's using that, right? So we don't want to look at like tiny, tiny pieces of text. Like I'm worried if you take a paragraph from the website and put it in your paper, right? If you take a sentence, who cares, right? So I'll double check and make sure that the parameters are set correctly. But just in case, the AFs should know if it's enclosed, it's fine, okay?
So now, after doing a PA or CLA, we are also, we have a, not that we worried about, but the similarity.
Yeah,
Similarity
yeah,
of
sure.
our post. So when we post it on there, right, we usually wait, okay, how many percent?
Well, the best thing to do is to avoid that, right? So if you don't copy-paste from anywhere, you shouldn't have a problem. That's it, right? So don't even worry about it. If you put quotations and you don't copy-paste, you should have no problem, all right? One problem with Turnitin is that you can only submit it once. Because if you submit it again, it's going to compare to your previous paper. So then there's going to be a very high degree of non-original content, right? So you submit it once, so you try and do your very best job, so you submit it once and you're okay, all right? The other reason for doing this is because then we have all of the student papers in the archives of Turnitin. So next year, when we have another group of students writing the same PA, we don't get borrowed papers from, oh, my friend took this class last year, right? And I'll just resubmit this paper. So we know that student already has the paper in the bank.
Disadvantage.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's another issue, not just that you copy-paste from other sources, but from other students. Another form of plagiarism is copy and paste from yourself. That doesn't happen so much in these classes, but sometimes when authors are publishing a study, they've conducted the same study and presented the results maybe in a different journal, and they want to publish again, so they just change it a little bit. Yeah, so then it counts for 2 publications. You can't do that either. So if you quote, you have to quote yourself, right? You have to cite yourself. According to Ciancio, 2000. Yeah. So that's an important standard. Okay, so let's finish and look at the rubric then for the presentation.
The last one.
The last one. So as I said, the presentation is ordinarily associated with CLA 2, but we changed it a little bit to take advantage of my time here. So with the presentation, what we're looking at is, first of all, the organization. Did you find the right page?
Yes.
Yeah. So the organization of the presentation, if the information is presented in a logical, interesting sequence. So what I've asked you to do is I've asked you to do a little mini vocabulary lesson, right? So you're going to do a lesson that's about 15 minutes long. You're going to be presenting a lesson to a class. So we have to pretend like we're students. We're going to be students taking your class. We're not other teachers. So you tell us, are we children? Are we adolescents? Are we adults? If you want us to behave like 5-year-olds, we will. Okay? So who are you teaching to? And you make the materials appropriate for that age and that level. Is it a beginner level, intermediate, or advanced? You need to let us know, who is this mini lesson for? So in terms of organization and the logical sequence, we want to see, does your lesson have a logical sequence, right? So you should start with some kind of activity, maybe like brainstorming, or getting a general idea, or presenting by teaching the topic first, and then give them something to do, and then give them some exercise or activity, right? So there should be a logical sequence to the steps in your lesson. You don't want to start with the assessment first, for example, right? Yeah. And then the next point is your subject matter knowledge. So we as a class will ask you questions. So how do you explain that word? Well, why? What does that mean? So are you able to answer the class's questions? So we're going to participate like a class, right? So you're going to be the teacher for 15 minutes and everybody else is going to be the students. And the students can ask you questions, and you have, if you can answer them well, then that shows that you have expertise, that you understand the topic. And the next point is like your visual support. So I would like you to make some kind of materials for teaching this lesson. So you can make a worksheet, a handout. You can bring in, like if you're going to do little children, puppets or felt, you know, so you have some objects that show the vocabulary. Maybe bring in some realia. Let's say you're going to teach camping equipment. So you bring in a backpack and rope and a compass and show them those objects, right? So this is the visual support for your lesson. Is it nice? Is it well done? Does it really reinforce the content? Sometimes teachers make worksheets, but it's not exactly what we're talking about, right? So there needs to be a correspondence. Does it help the lesson? If it doesn't help, then there's no reason to use it. Everything we do in the class needs to have a purpose, right? We have so little time. Our time needs to be used really wisely. We can't waste time doing extra stuff that's not beneficial. So was it useful? Was it helpful? Was it clear? Was it well done? Yeah?
What if like we want to do like a PowerPoint or short video or something like that?
Sure.
I don't know how we would do that with this computer because it's not.
Oh,
USB.
USB? Can you download the video and bring it on a USB?
Yeah, but like.
You can use it. You
Yeah.
can use your own computer.
Is it possible?
Oh, so you can can you attach your home computer?
Yeah.
Can you attach a laptop?
Well, it's okay.
I
So I don't know, we can go on the
No,
internet.
just go in the USB and just plug it in.
But we do have a portable projector.
What about that? Do you want to?
Do you have it?
No, not many. The school.
In the
Yeah.
next section,
That one, but this one is better.
It's okay.
See, you bring your USB plug in there.
USB. No.
But this is the question, can we use internet?
Yes.
We can, but not from the USB, right? What if you want to show a website or something like that?
Well, it's okay.
Is that a possibility? Yeah? Okay. So apparently we can. All right. Yeah, we can do it through the USB? Yeah? Through a laptop?
No,
No?
just the USB because we have to transfer the information into that computer.
So if I save the website on my pen drive and put the pen drive here, you'll see it?
No, I mean, this computer is connected to the internet, so you can.
It is?
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
You don't need to save the
Yeah, got it. Okay. So yes, we do have access to internet. So your visual support is really important, right? It should be well done, should be useful, should be interesting, should be colorful, should be clear, should be meaningful, all right? So if you want to use a website, that's fine. So that's what it means by graphical support. It's a wide range of things that you can do, right? You can bring in objects, you can show a website, you can make a handout, right? And then the last one is research as supporting evidence. So uses a variety of sources in researching accurate and detailed conclusions that solidify premise. What I'm hoping for here in this part, in the very last part, is basically that you're able to reference some information that's in the chapter. So this is supposed to be week 4, right, of your program. So week 4, chapter 8 is on lexicon. So if you have some time, can you please take a look at chapter 8 a little bit and at least try and reference some of the theory there, okay? I'll be very lenient in the grading as far as this aspect is concerned, because I realize it's only Wednesday and you haven't had a lot of time to read the chapter yet, okay? So I don't expect a lot of theory, but if you could reference some of the theory and perhaps some of the theory from previous chapters, maybe that'll make it easier for you. So something that you've already read. Can you substantiate it in the theory? Is this, like, are we using behavioralism to teach, or are we using more of a cognitive approach, or if you want to talk about Krashen or some of the other theories that you've already seen, okay?
But we are doing like actual presentation to teach the vocabulary. Let's say I'm teaching the vocabulary to the children. Just assume, right? So how this will be?
Very good question, absolutely. So you're never going to tell your students the theory, right? You're never going to say to your 5th grade students, oh, according to Lado. Yeah. So this will come up in the question and answer afterwards. So you teach your lesson, you've got 15 minutes, teach your lesson, and then afterwards, maybe you can explain to us, just in a couple of minutes, well, the reason that I chose this activity is because, according to this theory, okay? So this will be kind of like an aside, so we can hear what's going on inside your mind. It's not actually part of the lesson, but it's part of your planning. It was what it was in your mind when you planned the lesson.
Can we explain why teaching each activity in the presentation? Can we explain why we use the activity during the presentation?
That's fine too. Because this is an artificial situation. It's not a real class. We're pretending to be a class, right? That's taking your vocabulary lesson. So if you want to be teaching your vocabulary lesson and then stand out and say, this is the reason why I chose this, because blah, 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 and then you come back and teach and continue to teach, that's fine too. It might be easier if you have like 3 or 4 activities than waiting until the end to go back and explain. That's fine. What did you say? No?
I don't think it's a good idea because
To step out.
It cut the flow of the presentation.
It's up to you. You decide, right? So, like the CLAs and the PAs, they're individual productions, right? Everybody will have a completely different idea, different examples, different target teaching level, different age, whatever, different levels of experience of teachers. So everybody's unique. So if you want to do it that way, fine. If it doesn't work for your lesson, fine. If you want to do it afterwards, that's okay. It's a personal choice. Any other questions?
15 presentation for 50 real lesson.
Yeah, so the actual lesson itself, the actual vocabulary lesson, should be no more than 15 minutes. Okay?
Is it okay if I take the lesson that I am teaching in my school and I minimize it, like I just tell the steps and I conduct some activities only?
Oh, yes.
And then explain.
Yeah, I teach, but I don't go all the activities there, to introduce some activities.
That's an idea too. What you could say is you could say, okay, so this is my logic. This would be step 1, this would be step 2. Now, let's do step 3 together. And then I would do step 4. Okay? So you don't have time to do all 4 steps. You only have time for 1. But explain to us the logic and why. Yeah, that's fine too. That's a good idea.
It's better than like just choose some vocabulary and carry out the lesson in 15 minutes because it's not real. And I want to do something real in my class, so I take the lesson from the class and I present it to you guys here.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It really depends a lot on the topic that you're teaching, the content, the age level, and how you'll do it. So if you have a very large vocabulary lesson, you can't do all of it. You know, you can do part of it, that's fine. But let us know, where does this fit in the lesson? You should also kind of let us know, what do your students know? Is this completely new information? Is this the first time they've seen this vocabulary? Or is this at the end of the unit and we're doing a review, they've already seen it, right? So we have to have an idea of where your students are with this information.
Like an overview.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, actually there's 2 more criteria in the back.
Okay, so then on the next page, analysis, evaluation, and critical thinking. So the first one, examines conclusions, uses reasonable judgment, discriminates rationally, synthesize data, views all information critically. So sometimes some of these categories don't apply, right? They can't apply to every single assignment. So we use the same rubric, right? We have one rubric for CLAs, one rubric for discussion questions, and sometimes, for example, the CLA is a little bit different, so not all of the criteria apply. So for example here, synthesize data. You're not going to use that, right? So don't worry about that aspect. But this is kind of the overview, right? So did you use reasonable judgment? Was this a good idea? So looking at your lesson, when you give the overview, these are my students, they're 5th grade students, they're low intermediate, they've been studying English for 2 years now, and we've seen this vocabulary before. This is a review at the end of the unit, and then this is my activity. So this is your logic, right? This is what I'm looking at. Does this activity make sense based on this situation? Okay? So is that how you use reasonable judgment? Okay? And then if you view all information critically, that's always kind of interesting for me. I don't know if that will apply or not. But sometimes we can disagree with these theorists, right? We can say, wow, I don't think that's a very good idea. Maybe in the 1950s that made sense, but to me nowadays, it doesn't make sense at all, right? So it's very important to be a critical thinker. You don't just believe everything you hear, right? You hear advertisements on the radio, on TV all the time, right? Are you going to buy this cream that takes away all of your wrinkles? And it's like, oh, $50, of course, right? Yeah, so you can't believe everything that you hear. So we need to be critical consumers of research, of theory, of what we read. So this is where I'm interested in hearing your point of view. Maybe you'll disagree, maybe you won't. So this might apply, it might not. But this is an important idea for when you're writing your papers. In the CLAs, I like to see critical thinking. I think that's nice. And the last one, so for presentation, this is actually really important, right? Maintain eye contact, your pronunciation is good, everybody can hear you, you use good body language, right? You're not just sitting down and mumbling. So your presentation is really important when you're doing a lesson, right? So we want to be right neatly on the board so we can see what you're writing, things like that. Okay? All right? And if you stay within the time limit too, that should be there also, right? So we don't want your lesson to be 30 minutes because then we'll be in trouble, right? We won't have enough time to cover everything. Yes?
So how many vocabulary portions?
Okay, so that's up to you, right? So it depends on how you do it. Are you going to show us all of the steps in your vocabulary lesson? Or are you just going to show one, like you mentioned, like, okay, I'm only going to show this slice of the class because I don't have time for the whole thing. There are so many different ways of looking at it, so it depends on how you're going to present your lesson. But what does the research show in terms of how many new words a student can learn in one lesson? Do you know? What do you think?
10?
5 to 10.
5 to 10?
I laugh because like in our school, 35.
Oh, in a class?
Yeah, for 1 hour.
Oh my goodness. And what's your feeling about that? Overload, overwhelmed, what was it? Overextended. right? Too much information, you know, TMI. Yeah, TMI. 35 is impossible, right? Yeah, so the research shows about 5 to 7 words in a lesson.
5 or 7 words.
5 to 7.
It's a
So it's not realistic to think that students will learn 35 vocabulary items in an hour. It's just not realistic. And how many times do you need to see a word to really learn it?
20 times.
What do you guys think?
25.
20, 25? Do you need to see it that many? 10? Well, there's some discrepancy. I've seen some research that says at least 3, and I've seen one that says 6. You need to see the same word 6 times before you really internalize it, right? So the first time it's totally new information. The second time you see it, you go, I've seen that before, right? Don't you know when you look a word up in the dictionary, and then you see it again, and you look it up again, you say, I just looked that up, right? And you already forgot, right? And then the third time you're familiar with it. You kind of remember, right? Maybe by the 6th time you can actually use it. So there's a difference between receptive knowledge and productive knowledge, right? So being able to read it and understand it when you hear it is one thing. Being able to use it in the correct situation, with the correct collocations, that's a whole nother thing, right? So there are levels of what does it mean to know a word. Just because we see it once doesn't mean that we've learned it. So based on your lesson, you need to make that judgment. How many words can I cover in 15 minutes? I would say no more than 5. But just guessing, I don't know. If you want to do something realistic, like, okay, look, this is what I have to do in class. This is what is required. I need to look at these 35 words. This is how I do it. If you want to do that too, that's fine, because we have to deal with reality. There's research and then there's reality, right? So we have to teach the textbook or whatever it is, right, according to the syllabus. So we do our best, right, according to what we have. So what we need to do then is recycle the information. You need to see it over and over again. So if we see these 35 words over and over, eventually, yes, we will learn them, right? Not in the first hour. But I would keep it, you know, like 5, 10. I don't know if you want to try 35. But just show us, okay, realistically, this is what I can manage. Okay? But it's an individual choice. Okay? Other questions?
If you go a bit over, like 15 to 20.
Yeah, you know, I would like the...
15 to short.
Yeah, that'll be okay. We'll try, we have an hour for 2 presentations, okay? So you have 30 minutes total. But we need a little bit of time for your thinking, right? So you're going to explain to us, this is what I think, this is my target teaching level, this is what they've seen, this is my logic. And you need a little bit of time for questions, right? So there's going to be a little bit of dialogue. So it's okay if you go over, but the absolute maximum outer limit is 30 minutes.
So for the question, the answer question part is including the 15 minutes or that's separate?
Separate.
Okay.
Yeah, you have 15 minutes to present, right? So you have 15 minutes to conduct your lesson, right? And
Maximum time for presentation is 15 minutes.
yeah, but if you go over, if you go to 20, that's okay. But maximum for all of the dialogue about your presentation is 30 minutes.
I would ring the bell here for you. When the time is over, you ring the bell.
Will you?
They will do a stop.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, just-
We need the timekeeper? We need a timekeeper, yeah, because I'll be busy paying attention to the content, so somebody can keep track of it.
Some of us tends to
But you know, I remember the time when I was observed, maybe 2 weeks ago, well, the board of management came to my classroom and they observed me, so I had 70 minutes, one block, 70 minutes. So I always have to keep track, look at what I write on the board, my lesson plan over there, and then look at the clock all of the time, run back and forth, and I have to keep track of it. alright, and bang again when the bell rang again, I finish the lesson and say goodbye to the students. So, the
Perfect.
teacher was, yeah, right?
Yeah.
I said, wow, good management.
Good job.
Good school management. But anyway, I had to be quite hurry.
Yeah.
And I knew that some of the students couldn't write me. If I go a little bit more slowly, all the students can follow the lesson.
Right.
But
Yeah.
because of the observation, so I have to
Mhm.
keep track of what I write a little more.
Yeah.
Because I have already put that in the lesson plan. I have already shown you the lesson plan, so I have to follow that lesson plan.
Time management is a very important aspect of
Yeah.
teaching, isn't it? Right? We can just like go off on a tangent and talk about the same thing over and over, or speak too quickly and go through it too fast. It's really important. It's important to keep the students on track and keep them interested too, right? If we keep talking about the same thing too long, it gets boring. And also you bring up a good point that this is it's an unnatural situation, right? You're teaching to other teachers, right, who are pretending to be students. So it's always a little bit awkward, right? It's not totally authentic. It's not exactly like you would do in your class. So we understand that, right? So we know that it's an artificial situation. So don't be nervous and just like relax and we'll have fun with it. Okay.
So the PowerPoint is not.
It's not required. If you want to use PowerPoint, that's fine, but it's not required. I think ordinarily